everybody, and welcome to our first Early Years podcast. I'm Verity Welch, and today I have Isabelle Denniee with me to talk about the Coltail programme. Isabelle is the lead Early Years advisor and area Senko for the City of London. She has more than 25 years' experience in this field and has particular interest and knowledge in children's early language development.
Hello, Verity, and thank you for having me today on your first podcast.
You're welcome, Isabelle. It's great that you've been able to join us. But can you tell me to start, what is Coltail and what does it stand for?
So Coltail stands for City of London Talk and Listens Enthusiastically. I know it's a little bit of a mouthful. Coltail is a programme that aims to enable all children to get the best start in their speech, language and communication development. And you might have seen it, our mascot is a friendly blue and yellow dragon that is on different social media. So we have a social media campaign on Facebook, X, or previously Twitter and Instagram. And every Monday you will find answers to often asked questions about speech and language, as well as a recommendation for a book and some fun activities to do with children at home. Every Wednesday, we have 3 new Makaton signs to practice, and every Friday, a nursery rhyme to sing with children.
You mentioned Makaton. Can you remind us what is Makaton?
Makaton is a simple and easy way of communicating using signs, symbols, and speech. It's not a formal sign language. Makaton signs are based on the sign used in British Sign Language, but Makaton signs are always used with speech.
That sounds really useful.
Yes, it is. And today over 100,000 children and adults use Makaton symbol and sign, either as their main method of communication or as a way to support speech. So if you are not yet following us on social media, look out for Square Mile Families.
I'll do that, Isabelle, and I think I'll encourage anybody else listening to this podcast to do the same. Can I ask a question though? Why do we need to focus on speech, language and communication?
Research shows that children with communication difficulties are more likely to have behavior difficulties. Many children with identified behavior needs have previously unidentified speech, language and communication need. Imagine the frustration of not getting your message across. Language is absolutely crucial. The most important factor in reaching the expected level in English and math at the age of 11 is children's language skill at age 5, which is quite incredible. So, and that's more important than poverty or parental education. Another research has shown that in youth offending services, 65% of young offenders required speech and language therapy. 20% scored at a severely delayed and 6% at a very severely delayed level of language. That's quite incredible. By 22 months, a child's development can predict outcome at the age of 26. By 2 years, 75% of a child's brain growth has already occurred. And by 5 years old, a child's vocabulary can predict their educational success and outcome at the age of 30. That's why it's so important. So if we support children's speech, language and communication early, we improve outcome for children. We help to identify if they've got any difficulties, and then we can maximize their language acquisition.
That's interesting, Isabelle. Thank you. You've mentioned speech, language and communication. What's the difference between all three?
Speech, language and communication are quite complex skills, and they all interact greatly with each other. It's a process from listening through to understanding, planning and talking. But if we start first with communication, communication is how we interact with other people. And that includes body language, facial expression, eye contact, turn taking. It's also knowing when and how to start and finish talking, how to change topics. So really, when we have everyday conversation, we use a lot of communication skill. Now, speech is more how children use sound to make words. So, for example, articulating the sound k, at, and joining them together to make cat is included in speech. It also includes speaking with a clear voice in a way that makes speech interesting. So the intonation in your voice is speaking without hesitating too much or without repeating sounds or words. Now, language, the last part in speech, language and communication, covers understanding, and sometimes you will hear it referred as receptive language, as well as talking, which is sometimes called expressive language. Now, language has structure and rules, which means that people can share their message and be understood by others. So it's quite a complex skill. Language includes knowing and choosing the right words to explain what you mean, joining words together into sentences, but also being able to tell stories, having conversation, using word ending. So, for example, ed for the past. Language also includes grammar and different type of sentences. So, for example, being able to tell the difference between a question and a simple sentence. It's also making sense of what people say to you.
But what happens if a child's got difficulties with any one of these skills?
Well, the first thing that most people notice is a child's behavior, and that's usually what I receive referral for. So, for example, difficulty with self-control, an ability to follow rules or understand what the consequences of an action are. But these needs will also have an impact on the child's confidence and on their self-esteem, on how they can control their emotion. Because to be able to understand your emotion, you've got to be able to name them and then know how to express them in words. And that then leads on to difficulty interacting with other people. To make friends, for example, you need to be able to use language. To get into play, you need to be able to start with words. But also we know that difficulty with speech, language and communication is going to negatively impact children's learning and their problem-solving skills, their memory. So the earlier we intervene, the better.
Can you just remind us all, though, how do children begin to use language in the first place?
We know that as humans, we are social animals, so we want to interact with others. And before a child uses their first word, they need to want to communicate with others. They need to hear language directed to them. So that's why it's important that parents and adults in general take time to speak face to face with babies. I mean, babies and young children don't just learn by looking at a phone screen. I know there are a lot of what are called educational apps that have been given to parents, but really children need to see faces, eyes, lips of adults and look at them, have this face-to-face interaction to understand how to make sound and form words. It also helps them to learn that using their voice has a purpose and will provoke a reaction in an adult. With a screen, the screen talks at you, but not to you. You can't respond to a screen. So it's still important to remember that there is a wide variation in typical development for different children, so that all children do not develop at the same time. It's within each child or within, different contexts. So some children speak more at home. Some children speak more when they are with other people.
Is there a point where we should start to worry about a child's speech and language?
Well, Verity, so as I say, it will depend on the child and the context, but things that people, and particularly early years practitioner, should look out for. For example, a child who has no word by the age of 18 months, or if they are younger than 18 months, are they making sounds that are expected for their age? If they are around 18 months, do they seem to understand what is being said to them? Do they make eye contact? Do they respond to very simple sentences and instruction, nothing very complicated? Again, if a child is not putting two words together by the age of 2.5 years, or if they are not trying to interact and communicate in some ways with other children, that's something to start having some concern about. Now, is a child showing real sign of frustration because they're trying to say something, but other people do not understand them? And that should really be in place by the time they're 3.5. People outside the child's close family should be able to understand most of what the child say. As I say, this will depend on each child, but this is something to think about. So I can only reiterate how important it is to talk to children throughout the day. It doesn't have to be something very complicated, talking about everyday life. And quality is more important than quantity. A research has shown that some children hear 5 positive words and 11 negative words per hour. So they're hearing a lot more no and don't than positive interaction. So that's one encouragement to 2 discouragement, which is not great for a child. So that would equate, and I'm sorry these are numbers, but it's important to get an idea that in a 5,200 hour per year, that would be 26,000 encouragement for a staggering 57,000 discouragement or negative words. So just talking about what you're doing in everyday activities, cooking, interacting during nappy changing time, bath time, that really matters. If you just spend 5 minutes a day reading to a child, or not even reading, just telling a story, this can have a real positive impact on a child's vocabulary.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Isabelle. There's some really useful information and tips here around understanding and supporting a child's speech, language and communication.
Thank you, Verity. Bye.
Remember to look out for the Coaltail Top Tips on social media at Square Mile Families. And we look forward to another informative podcast next time. Bye.